Though the night is long, I will find the strength. Why did you have to leave me here?
Morning arrived slowly in the small coastal town, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise over lives that carried silent struggles. The sea breeze brushed softly against the wooden huts, carrying the smell of salt and distant rain. In one of those humble homes lived a boy whose heart was far bigger than the world he had been given. Liam Santos, just 13, stepped outside barefoot. The ground was cool, still wet from last night's drizzle. His small bag hung over his shoulder, worn, faded, but reliable. Every day, before the rest of the town woke, he would begin his quiet routine. He wasn't like other boys his age. While others played by the shore, Liam carried responsibilities that didn't fit his fragile frame. Inside their dimly lit home, his mother, Maria, rested on a bamboo bed. Her once strong voice, her gift, her joy, had weakened over the years. She had been a hotel singer, someone who could brighten a room with her melodies. But sickness took her strength, leaving Liam to become the pillar of their tiny world. The boy glanced back at her gently, making sure she was sleeping comfortably. With every step he took away from home, he wished he could do more for her. But all he had was his voice, and a hope he never allowed to fade. The town was quiet as Liam walked through the narrow pathways. When he reached the small marketplace, he stepped onto a wooden crate, his makeshift stage. The wood creaked softly under his weight. Vendors were setting up their stalls, and the scent of fresh fish mixed with warm bread filled the air. Liam closed his eyes and began to sing. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried something deeper, warmth, honesty, a longing shaped by nights of worry and days of perseverance. People passing by slowed their steps. Some smiled, some nodded, some dropped a few coins into the can beside him. Others walked on, lost in their own battles. Yet Liam never stopped. Every note he sang felt like a prayer drifting through the morning light, a soft message asking life to be a little kinder. As the sun climbed higher, Liam packed his things. He collected the coins carefully, thinking only of the medicines his mother needed. He started walking home, unaware that fate had quietly placed a letter at their doorstep, an envelope that carried a chance neither of them ever dreamed possible. The morning the letter arrived, the sky over Liam's town carried a strange brightness. It was as if the world itself sensed that something extraordinary was about to begin. Maria held the envelope with trembling hands. Even before opening it, she felt a shift inside her, like hope knocking on a door that had long been closed. The letter announced that a video Liam had once recorded for a local charity event had reached people far beyond their village. Someone from abroad had forwarded it to the producers of America's Got Talent. It was an invitation for Liam to audition. A chance that felt too big for their small world. Maria looked at her son with eyes full of fear and wonder. Liam stood quietly, unsure whether to believe such a miracle. But deep inside, something stirred, a spark he had never felt before. He had spent years singing for coins, for food, for survival. But now, for the first time, he might sing for a dream. The days that followed were a blur of preparation and prayers. Neighbors brought what little they could offer, food for the journey, blessings, and whispers of hope. The entire town felt invested in the boy who had carried so much on his young shoulders. When they reached the airport, everything felt unreal. The bright lights, the giant screens, the rush of travelers, it was a world Liam had only seen on small, flickering televisions. He held his mother's hand tightly, afraid of getting lost in the sea of unfamiliar faces. Maria, though weak, stood tall beside him, hiding her worries behind a gentle strength only a mother could carry. The flight itself felt like stepping into another universe. Liam watched clouds drift past the window as if the sky was welcoming him into a future that once seemed unreachable. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a life where his mother didn't have to struggle, where their home wasn't filled with worry, where music didn't carry the weight of survival. When they landed in America, everything was bigger, louder, brighter. Liam's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and fear. As they reached the AGT backstage area, he saw performers practicing, stretching, adjusting costumes. Some seemed confident. Some nervous. All of them older, taller, more experienced. Yet something inside Liam remained steady. The morning the letter arrived, the sky over Liam's town carried a strange brightness. It was as if the world itself sensed that something extraordinary was about to begin. Maria held the envelope with trembling hands. Even before opening it, she felt a shift inside her, like hope knocking on a door that had long been closed. The letter announced that a video Liam had once recorded for a local charity event had reached people far beyond their village. Someone from abroad had forwarded it to the producers of America's Got Talent. It was an invitation for Liam to audition. A chance that felt too big for their small world. Maria looked backstage at AGT, the air felt heavy with anticipation. Bright lights flickered from every corner, casting long shadows across the floor. Performers whispered to themselves, some pacing, some shaking nervously, others standing still as statues. And in the middle of all this noise stood Liam, small, quiet, steady. He held his mother's hand before stepping forward, taking a slow breath that filled his chest with courage he didn't know he had. The stage assistant guided him toward the entrance. Each step felt like walking into a dream, one he didn't dare imagine too deeply, afraid it might slip away. When the curtain parted, a wall of lights hit him. The stage stretched wide, seeming endless beneath his small feet. The audience sat in rows that climbed upward like waves, full of curious faces waiting to be moved, entertained, or surprised. Their voices merged into a soft hum that vibrated through the air. The judges sat in front, their presence powerful and intimidating. Simon Cowell leaned back, sharp eyes studying the boy. Nothing about his expression revealed what he expected, but Liam could feel the weight of that silent gaze. A hush fell across the room. Even the cameras seemed to lower their sound, as if the universe leaned closer to witness what this fragile voice might bring. Liam stepped toward the center of the stage. He felt the heat of the spotlights wrap around him like a blanket. He imagined his mother somewhere backstage, holding her breath, praying for strength on his behalf. His heart pounded softly inside his chest, not out of fear, but out of purpose. With a slow inhale, he closed his eyes. And then, he began. The first note floated into the air like a feather released into the wind. It wasn't loud, but it carried a truth so pure that the room seemed to freeze. The audience leaned forward. The judges shifted in their seats. The second note came stronger, filled with longing, shaped by sleepless nights, and softened by a boy's enduring hope. His voice rose and fell like waves, gentle yet powerful, reaching corners of the theater untouched by sound before. Something in his tone carried a story. A story of a boy who had carried the weight of an entire household, who had sung through hunger, through sickness, through fear, through endless days of uncertainty. As the melody deepened, the room transformed. As Liam moved into the most emotional part of his song, something powerful began to shift inside the massive theater. His voice, fragile yet strong, rose like a small flame in a dark room, soft at first, then glowing brighter with every beat of his heart. The audience watched him with an intensity rarely seen on talent stages. It wasn't the kind of attention given to a performer. It was the kind of attention that only truth could capture. People felt something stirring inside them, distant memories, forgotten hopes, quiet wounds they never shared with anyone. Liam sang as though every note carried a piece of his soul. His voice trembled at moments, not from fear, but from the weight of what he had lived. There were nights he had sung beside his mother's bedside, believing his voice could ease her pain. There were mornings he had walked miles just to make enough for a meal. These experiences shaped a tone no training could create. The camera slowly moved across the judges' table. Their expressions softened, their eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and tenderness. But Simon Cowell, his reaction was different. At first, he sat still, arms folded, eyes fixed on the boy before him. He tried to maintain his usual sharp composure. But the deeper Liam went into the song, the more something cracked inside Simon's carefully guarded heart. It began with a small shift in his breathing. Then his eyes glistened under the bright stage lights. He looked away for a moment, as if trying to find a place to hide the emotions rising too quickly. For a man who had heard thousands of voices, something about this child's song cut deeper than any performance before. It wasn't just the skill. It was the innocence. The sincerity. The reminder of how pure music once felt before fame, pressure, and expectation complicated everything. As Liam reached the emotional peak of the song, Simon's eyes filled completely. A single tear escaped, unplanned, unguarded, impossible to hide. He wiped it quickly, but another followed, and then another, until he no longer tried to hold them back. The audience noticed. The judges noticed. But no one made a sound. Because in that moment, everyone understood, this wasn't just a performance. It was healing unfolding right in front of them. A young boy from a small town had touched a heart believed to be unshakable. When Liam held his final note, the theater erupted, not in noise, but in emotion. People rose to their feet instinctively. Hands covered mouths. Tears streamed down faces. It was a wave of human connection, sudden, overwhelming, pure. Simon stood slowly, his eyes still wet. His expression carried something rare, gratitude. Liam had awakened a part of him he had forgotten, the part that believed in miracles, sincerity, and the power of a single voice. The music faded. But the moment stayed suspended in time, etched into every heart in the room. Backstage, the noise of applause still echoed faintly through the walls, vibrating like a distant heartbeat. Liam stepped off the stage slowly, as though he were waking from a dream he wasn't ready to leave. His small chest moved with deep breaths, each one filled with disbelief and quiet relief. Maria stood waiting with trembling hands pressed against her heart. When she saw her son walking toward her, her whole face softened. Tears surged to her eyes, not from sorrow this time, but from pride so overwhelming it nearly stole her breath. She gathered him into her arms, holding him with a tenderness shaped by years of prayer and fear. Liam sank into her embrace, suddenly aware of how much he had carried alone, and how light he felt now that the moment had finally arrived. Behind them, crew members moved quickly, but their eyes lingered on the pair. Some smiled, touched by the sincerity of their bond. Others wiped their eyes quietly before continuing with their tasks. It was rare, even in a place filled with talent and dreams, to witness a moment so pure and unguarded. Liam felt warmth settle in his chest. He didn't fully understand what he had just done, or why the entire theater had risen to its feet, or why Simon Cowell, a man known for his strength and sharpness, had cried. All he knew was that something inside him felt open, as if the world had finally heard a voice he had kept hidden for so long. Then, through the soft commotion backstage, Simon appeared. He walked slower than usual, his expression different from the one the world recognized. There was no armor, no distance, no judgment, just a quiet tenderness that could only come from a place of genuine emotion. His eyes were still slightly red, his posture gentler, softened by a feeling he couldn't disguise even if he tried. He stopped beside Liam and Maria, offering them a moment of acknowledgement that spoke louder than words ever could. It wasn't the approval of a judge. It wasn't the excitement of a television moment. It was something human, one heart recognizing another. Maria's eyes filled again, overwhelmed that a man who had seen greatness around the world stood humbled before her son. Liam lowered his gaze shyly, feeling a warmth spreading through him, like sunlight breaking through clouds. The world outside continued buzzing, cameras recording, audience cheering, producers celebrating. But in this small corner backstage, there was only stillness. A moment suspended between three people whose lives had briefly intersected in a way none of them expected. As Liam and his mother stepped away, the weight of their struggles seemed lighter. A door had opened, a door they once believed was locked forever. And for Simon, the moment remained etched in his heart. A reminder that sometimes, the smallest voices carried the greatest power. A reminder that sincerity could still break through the noise of the world. In that quiet backstage hallway, two lives began to change, one rising from Ha.
This is the moment that we've waited for, louder than ever before. I've waited for this moment all my life, chasing the lights until I finally shine.
The morning in Liam Santos's small Filipino town began long before the sun decided to rise. A pale blue light rested over the rooftops, touching the quiet streets with a softness that only early dawn could bring. Roosters crowed in the distance, and the sound of a lone tricycle echoed faintly through the narrow road, as if the world was waking up slowly, one breath at a time. Inside a tiny wooden house, Liam sat on the edge of his bed. He was 16, slim, quiet, and gentle in a way the world often overlooked. He held his old earphones, the wire taped in places where it had broken too many times. An old Elvis song played, slightly distorted, but still enough to fill his small room with the sound of a dream. Liam closed his eyes. For a moment, the cracked walls of his room disappeared. The uneven floor, the faded posters, the second-hand speaker, everything vanished. In his mind, he was standing on a massive stage, surrounded by thousands of lights. He could feel the warmth of a spotlight. He could imagine the silence of a crowd waiting for him. It was a world far bigger than the one he knew, but it was the only place where he felt truly alive. In the doorway, his mother Mira watched him. Her face carried years of sacrifice, lines carved by long nights, early mornings, and the never-ending effort to give her child little pockets of hope. She saw the same shyness in Liam that had always made him easy to miss in a crowd. But she also saw something stronger, a quiet fire that refused to fade. The sky outside began to turn orange, and the first ray of light slipped into the room, brushing against Liam's face. He inhaled deeply, almost as if gathering courage from that single beam of sun. Today felt different. He didn't know exactly why, but there was a heaviness in his chest, a mixture of fear, longing, and the strange belief that something in his life was about to shift. A question lingered in the air, unspoken but alive. Can a boy who has never been noticed suddenly become unforgettable? And in that fragile morning silence, the world seemed to wait for his answer. The city felt like another universe compared to the quiet streets Liam had always known. The moment he and Mira stepped out of the early morning bus, the world exploded into movement. Cars rushed past, jeepneys rattled loudly, and strangers hurried across crowded sidewalks as if every second of their lives mattered. Liam clutched his small backpack tightly. Inside it were the only things he needed, his registration form, a bottle of water, and an old handkerchief his mother had given him years ago. He kept touching it without thinking, his fingers searching for comfort in its worn fabric. Mira walked beside him, trying to hide her own fear beneath a calm expression. Behind her gentle eyes was a storm of hope she carried alone for many years. She had prayed for this day, feared it, dreamed of it, and now that it was here, her heart trembled with gratitude and worry all at once. The audition venue towered above them, a massive building filled with bright banners, flashing screens, and thousands of dreamers just like Liam. Some held guitars. Some rehearsed dance moves in corners. Some wiped tears from their faces, overwhelmed even before stepping inside. Every hallway echoed with ambition, nerves, and the fragile belief that one moment could change everything. Liam felt small standing among them. Their confidence felt intimidating, their voices louder, their energy stronger. He stared at the number tag the volunteers handed him. It fluttered slightly in his hand, as if shaken by his own heartbeat. Inside the venue, bright lights reflected on glossy floors. The air buzzed with excitement and fear blending together, an atmosphere too big for someone who grew up in quiet mornings and tiny rooms. Every step he took felt heavy, as if he was walking deeper into a dream he wasn't sure he was ready for. But when Mira gently touched his shoulder, the noise around him softened. Her silent presence reminded him of every sacrifice, every night she stayed awake worrying about the future, every moment she pushed him forward even when he doubted himself. The city felt like another universe compared to the quiet streets Liam had always known. The moment he and Mira stepped out of the early morning bus, the world exploded into movement. Cars rushed past, jeepneys rattled loudly, and strangers hurried across crowded sidewalks as if every second of their lives mattered. Liam clutched his small backpack tightly. Inside it were the only things he needed: his registration form, a bottle of water, and an old handkerchief his mother had given him years ago. He kept touching it without thinking, his fingers searching for comfort in its worn fabric. Mira walked beside him, trying to hide her own fear beneath a calm expression. Behind her gentle eyes was a storm of hope she carried alone for many years. She had prayed for this day, feared it, dreamed of it, and now that it was here, her heart trembled with gratitude and worry all at once. The audition venue towered above them, a massive building filled with bright banners, flashing screens, and thousands of dreamers just like Liam. Some held guitars. Some rehearsed dance moves in corners. Some wiped tears from their faces, overwhelmed even before stepping inside. Every hallway echoed with ambition, nerves, and the fragile belief that one moment could change everything. Liam felt small standing among them. Their confidence felt intimidating, their voices louder, their energy stronger. He stared at the number tag the volunteers handed him. It fluttered slightly in his hand, as if shaken by his own heartbeat. Inside the venue, bright lights reflected on glossy floors. The air buzzed with excitement and fear blending together, an atmosphere too big for someone who grew up in quiet mornings and tiny rooms. Every step he took felt heavy, as if he was walking deeper into a dream he wasn't sure he was ready for. But when Mira gently touched his shoulder, the noise around him softened. Her silent presence reminded him of every sacrifice, every night she stayed awake worrying about the future, every moment she pushed him forward even when he doubted himself. And in that crowded hallway filled with strangers chasing the same dream, Liam realized something important. This wasn't just his journey. It was theirs. And for the first time since arriving in the vast city, he took a breath that felt steady. As if somewhere deep inside, he knew he was meant to be here. The first note that left Liam's lips was soft, almost fragile. But within that softness was something unmistakable. A warmth. A sincerity. A quiet power shaped by years of singing in small rooms where only dreams listened. The sound drifted into the massive auditorium like a breeze brushing against still water. It wasn't loud. It wasn't bold. It was pure. And purity, sometimes, is what the world feels the deepest. From the judges' table, expressions began to shift. What started as casual attention slowly transformed into surprise. Their eyes sharpened, their posture lifted, as if trying to understand how someone so young, so quiet, could produce a voice that carried such emotion. The audience felt it too. The restless whispers faded. Heads tilted gently, leaning closer without meaning to. A few hands rested over hearts. Some exchanged stunned glances, silently asking each other if they were hearing what they thought they were hearing. Liam did not see any of them. He was lost inside the music, inside the memory of every night he had sung alone. A calm washed over him, replacing fear with something steadier. He no longer felt like a boy trapped in a spotlight, he felt like a storyteller, pouring out years of hidden dreams into every note. As the chorus rose, his voice grew stronger. Still gentle, still human, but now carrying a spark of confidence that made the performance feel alive. The way he shaped each note, carefully, emotionally, made it seem as though he wasn't copying Elvis. He was honoring him, breathing new life into a voice that had once changed the world. People in the audience forgot to breathe. The atmosphere thickened, wrapped in an almost reverent silence. This wasn't just a performance, it felt like a calling. A moment that touches strangers in a way words never can. The final note stretched into the air, trembling slightly, filled with a kind of innocence and longing that could break even the hardest heart. It hung there, gentle, glowing, before dissolving into the stillness. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody clapped. Nobody spoke. The entire crowd simply sat frozen, overwhelmed by something they could not explain. They had come expecting a performance. But they had just witnessed a miracle. And then, all at once, the silence shattered into applause that shook the room. Backstage lights flickered softly, casting long shadows along the narrow hallway where Liam stood. His hands were pressed over his face, not to hide fear this time, but to hold together the overwhelming emotions rising inside him. His chest rose and fell in uneven breaths, as if he was still trying to believe what had just happened on that stage. He could still feel the warmth of the spotlight on his skin. Still hear the echo of applause that had shaken the entire auditorium. Still sense the way the world had stopped, just for him. The memory looped in his mind like a dream refusing to end. Then he felt familiar arms wrapped gently around him. Mira held him tightly, her shoulders trembling. The tears she carried for years, tears of sacrifice, worry, hope, and silent strength, finally found a home. She rested her forehead against her son's back, holding him as if the moment itself was too precious to let slip away. Around them, people hurried through the hallway. Producers with headsets whispered excitedly. Crew members pointed toward monitors showing a replay of Liam's performance. Camera operators spoke to each other with wide eyes, shocked by what they had witnessed. For a moment, Liam became the quiet center of a whirlwind he never imagined he would be part of. Yet through all the chaos, he remained still. He didn't chase the cameras or the crowds. He simply leaned into his mother's embrace, grounded by the one person who had believed in him long before the world did. Later that evening, as they boarded the bus home, the city lights shimmered outside the window, soft, glowing, full of new possibility. The bus engine hummed gently beneath their feet, creating a comforting rhythm that matched Liam's slower, steadier breathing. Mira watched her son quietly. His eyes were tired, but they carried a light she had never seen before, a quiet confidence, a belief that maybe he was no longer the boy who blended into the background. As the bus rolled down the highway, Liam rested his head against the cool glass. The world outside felt different now. Wider. Kinder. Open. In that moment, he understood something simple but powerful. Sometimes a single moment of courage can turn an unnoticed life into a voice the world will never forget. And tonight, that voice belonged to him.
I'm coming home. Coming home.
The sun had not yet risen over the quiet fishing village when the first sounds of morning began to stir. The gentle splash of waves brushed against the wooden stilts of old houses, and a soft mist curled above the shoreline like a thin blanket trying to protect the world from the coming day. In that sleepy stillness, a little boy slowly made his way toward the water, holding an old radio to his chest as if it were something fragile. His name was Ilian, a 9-year-old Filipino boy with a face that held stories far older than his years. His small steps left faint marks on the damp sand, each print filled with determination. He wore the same worn-out slippers he'd used for 2 years, the straps held together with a thin piece of fishing line. Yet he walked with the confidence of someone who believed that even broken things could still carry dreams. The village still slept, but Ilian's day began earlier than most. The ocean had always been the first to hear his voice. He stood by the edge of the water, staring at the calm horizon, and pressed the radio's play button. The speakers crackled with static before releasing a soft melody, old, shaky, but familiar. The boy listened for a moment, then closed his eyes and let the rhythm settle inside his chest. His mother, Maria, watched from a distance near their small bamboo hut. Her tired eyes followed her son with a longing that only a mother living in poverty could understand. She knew he did not sing for applause or recognition. He sang because life had left him with very few ways to fight back. His voice was his courage, his escape, and sometimes, the only thing that helped him forget the hunger that visited their home more often than hope did. With the first light of dawn breaking across the sky, Ilian began to sing. His voice rose gently, blending with the sound of the waves. It carried the rawness of a child who had seen too much, yet still believed in something beautiful. The afternoon sun rested gently over the village when Maria received a message that would shift the direction of their lives. It came from Rodel, her older brother living in California, a man known for his quiet kindness and simple hopes. For years he had driven a taxi through crowded streets, saving small amounts of money to send home whenever he could. But this time, he had done something different, something bold. He had taken a shaky video of Ilian singing by the shore and submitted it to a show none of them had ever imagined reaching, America's Got Talent. The email arrived unexpectedly, carrying words that made Maria's hands tremble. It wasn't just a reply. It was an invitation. News spread through the fishing village faster than the tides. Children ran barefoot across narrow walkways, shouting Ilian's name with sparkling curiosity. The elders paused from cleaning their fishing nets, whispering in disbelief. Mothers gathered in small circles, their eyes softening with pride. For a village where dreams often faded before they even began, this felt like a miracle. But miracles still needed money. And money was something they did not have. Yet, in a way only communities built on love understood, everyone contributed. A fisherman sold a portion of his morning catch at a lower price so buyers would take more. A neighbor brought a small jar of coins she had saved for a roof repair. A group of children gave up the few pesos they had collected from selling seashells to tourists. No one questioned whether their contribution was enough. They simply gave. Days later, Maria and Ilian stood at the small airport, clutching two worn-out bags that carried nothing more than clothes, a few snacks, and a dream too big for any luggage. The flight felt endless. The seats were stiff, and the air smelled unfamiliar. But Ilian kept his eyes glued to the window. He watched the clouds drift like floating mountains, glowing in the sunlight. For the first time in his life, he saw the world from above, from a place where his problems looked small, and his dreams looked possible. The moment Ilian stepped into the vast auditorium, his small frame seemed to shrink even further. The lights above glowed like stars caught inside metal cages, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Every sound, from footsteps to distant cheers, echoed through the air like a reminder of how far he was from the quiet shores of home. He held the microphone with both hands, gripping it the way a child might cling to a lifeline. The judges' table stood ahead like a wall of expectations. Faces known around the world watched him with a mix of curiosity, uncertainty, and the calm patience of people who had seen thousands before him. Yet none of those faces were familiar to Ilian. They felt larger than life, almost unreal. Beyond them, the audience stretched endlessly. Rows and rows of strangers sat in the darkness, breathing the same anticipation, waiting for something they didn't even know they needed. The room buzzed with whispers, soft, speculative, doubtful. To many, he looked too small, too fragile, too young to change anything. Ilian felt his heartbeat drum against his ribs, each thump echoing louder than the last. The stage seemed to breathe around him, the way a giant inhales before deciding whether to embrace or swallow someone whole. For a moment, fear wrapped tightly around his chest, threatening to silence him before he even began. But then he remembered the ocean. He remembered the waves that had listened without judgment. He remembered the mornings when the sky turned gold while he sang to survive. He remembered Maria's tired smile, shaped by hope and sacrifice. That memory steadied him. Slowly, he closed his eyes. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. The judges grew still. The camera light blinked, capturing every second as if the world might need proof later. The silence deepened, thick, heavy, powerful. It wasn't the silence of doubt anymore. It was the silence of possibility. A moment suspended between who Ilian had been and who he was about to become. Then, with a breath that carried the weight of his entire life, he prepared to release the one thing the world could not anticipate, his voice. The first note left Ilian's lips like a fragile whisper, trembling in the air as if unsure whether it belonged on a stage so grand. But the moment it drifted into the silence, something shifted, subtly, deeply, undeniably. The room, once filled with restless anticipation, grew impossibly still. His voice carried a softness that felt almost too pure for a place of spotlights and cameras. It rose slowly, unfolding like a small flower discovering sunlight for the first time. Every note shimmered with the ache of a child who had lived through storms yet still believed in hope. As the melody deepened, the audience leaned closer without realizing it. The judges, who moments earlier wore expressions of casual interest, now sat frozen, eyes widening with every rise and fall of his fragile voice. There was something in the way he sang, something unpolished, untrained, but beautifully honest. It was the kind of honesty people forgot existed. Ilian sang about loss. About the father the sea had taken from him. About nights spent waiting for footsteps that would never return. About the weight a little boy carried when a family depended on him to keep dreaming. His voice cracked slightly in the middle of a high note, not from weakness, but from truth. That single crack struck the audience harder than any perfect performance ever could. It reminded them of the human behind the sound, a child who had known pain far earlier than he should have. A woman in the front row pressed her hand to her mouth, tears gathering in her eyes. A man further back wiped his face discreetly, hoping no one would notice. Even the cameras, usually steady and emotionless, seemed to tremble slightly as they captured the moment. And as Ilian poured his heart into the final verse, the song transformed into something greater than itself. It became a prayer, a delicate plea carried by the voice of a boy who had learned to be brave long before he learned to be happy. By the time his last note faded into the air, the room was no longer the same. Something inside it had shattered, softened, awakened. A whole world had begun to cry. When the final note left Ilian's lips, it drifted gently into the space above him, hanging there for a moment as though unwilling to disappear. The auditorium remained silent, so silent it felt unreal. It was the kind of silence that didn't come from confusion or hesitation, but from hearts that had been moved too deeply to react. Ilian kept his eyes lowered, unsure of what to do next. His small chest rose and fell with slow breaths, each one trembling from the weight he had just poured out. He wasn't thinking about applause or approval. He was thinking about home, about the waves that once carried his voice before anyone knew his name. Then, slowly, the silence broke. Someone in the upper balcony wiped their face. A few sniffles echoed softly in the air. The judges stared at Ilian with expressions that didn't fit into any category the show usually displayed, no judgment, no calculation, just raw human emotion. Simon Cowell leaned back for a moment, as if struggling to steady himself. Something about the boy's voice had loosened a piece of him he didn't expect. Something old. Something tender. Something he never allowed the world to see. And then he stood. He didn't hurry. He didn't speak. He simply walked toward the golden buzzer with a calmness that made the audience lean forward in disbelief. Ilian lifted his head just enough to see Simon's hand hover over the button, hesitant, emotional, transformed. In the next instant, the world erupted. The golden buzzer lit up, exploding in a burst of light. A thunderous sound filled the hall, and golden confetti rained from the sky like blessings falling from heaven. The crowd rose to their feet, cheering, crying, clapping, not because of talent alone, but because of the purity of a child who sang with his soul. Maria collapsed into her hands backstage, tears streaming down her face. Her heart felt too full, too overwhelmed, too grateful to contain everything happening at once. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every whispered prayer had led to this moment. Ilian stood beneath the golden rain, his face tilted upward. The confetti touched his skin softly, like a promise, like a beginning, like something the universe had always meant for him. In that shining moment, his life changed forever.